All right, and for the latest on the U.S. presidential election results, we're now joined by our correspondent in York, Sherwin Bryce-Pease. A very good day to you, Sherwin, joining us there from New York. Well, I mean, Joe Biden is already kind of talking as though he is America's next president. I guess they've called it really on their side as the Democrats. Is it safe enough to do so? And what is the latest at this time?
I mean, I think there is broad consensus that Joe Biden is going to win this race. We've seen the trajectory shift in his favor over the last 48 hours. And as you know, as much as this is, we can use the analogy of the story of the tortoise and the hare. Remember, the tortoise eventually wins that race, Flo. So that's kind of the scenario we're seeing here. Slow, methodical. The ballots are being processed very slowly. There you see pictures of one of the ballot precincts where these ballots are being tabulated. It's a slow, painstaking process. People are working slowly but methodically into the late night. It's not as fast as everyone would have expected, but Joe Biden coming out last night in his city of Wilmington, Delaware, talking about how he was going to win this race. He's on track to get over 300 electoral college votes. Remember, you only need 270. If he wins Pennsylvania, which is kind of the sentiment here that he was going to do that will put him over the edge and we'll have a president-elect. He talked about how they are breaking records as Democrats in southern states like Arizona, which hasn't voted for a Democratic presidential nominee since 1996. Similar indications in Georgia, where we are going to probably see a recount because the margins are so slim. But Georgia hasn't gone Democrat since 1992. And Republicans are hoping for a comeback for President Trump in the state of Arizona because it's a Republican bastion. It's a Republican-run state, so it's difficult for the president to cry fraud when this election is being run by Republican authorities. Biden called for the electorate to remain calm and patient because they are not calm and patient. They are very impatient to get to the end of this process, as you can well imagine. It's time to come together as a nation and heal. My responsibility as president will be to represent the whole nation, something we perhaps have not seen to a great extent from the president, the incumbent, in the last 4 years. Trump, of course, continuing to tweet, Twitter continuing to flag those tweets. So I don't want to repeat the president's misstatements and his false claims of fraud. He has now tweeted that his lawyers will be speaking in the next hour at a hotel, the Four Seasons Hotel in Philadelphia. Of course, Philadelphia, the big city in Pennsylvania, where there's still lots of outstanding ballots. Philadelphia, of course, also a Democratic stronghold in the state of Pennsylvania. So as the theory goes, with more of those ballots coming from that center, that's going to favor the Democratic nominee, Joe Biden, and he will therefore be able to extend his lead. So what you are also hearing from the Democratic side is a lot of frustration that this race has not been called by the news media decision desks. Kind of that's how it works, right? CNN, the New York Times, Fox News, they project who's going to win, and they're very concerned that that projection has not happened yet.
Well, I'm worried you don't want to talk about it, but I had actually made a screenshot just before Twitter got rid of that that tweet from President Trump, and that's actually where I was going. But I'll ask it in a more diplomatic way than I was planning to. So of course he's been tweeting quite furiously, and I do see that tweet that you're talking about, the lawyers' press conference in Philadelphia. He says that tens of thousands of votes were illegally received after 8 p.m. on Tuesday. Very inarticulate, I must say, saying bad things have taken place during those hours where legal transparency was viciously and crudely not allowed. What is he talking about?
I mean, your guess is as good as mine, right? I mean, the president is allowed to have his own opinions, but he's not allowed to his own set of facts. I mean, that's a line that actually comes from Mike Pence, his vice presidential candidate who was debating Kamala Harris at the time. Look, the president is pretty much, if you give the president a rifle right now or a gun and put a blindfold on and he's shooting and he's hoping to hit something in the dark, that's kind of what's going on here. He's not going to concede anytime soon. That's very clear with the indication that his lawyers are going to be speaking here. But in terms of, I think he's referring there to the state of Pennsylvania. A Supreme Court ruling in the state of Pennsylvania. Remember, I'm not talking about the Washington Supreme Court. I'm talking about the state-level Supreme Court. Each state has one. And they ruled that ballots could be received 3 days after November 3rd. So when the president is saying ballots were illegally received post November 3rd at 8 p.m. when the polls closed in Philadelphia, he's referring to legal ballots that were allowed by the local Supreme Court in Pennsylvania to be processed up to 3 days after Election Day, which would have been 5 p.m., I believe, yesterday. We have a similar case in the state of Nevada. Nevada is allowing ballots to come into and be into precincts and to be processed up to November 10th. So that's just the state law. Remember, we've constantly talked about how different states have different rules around their election system, different to how the centralized system works in South Africa, where you have a centralized IEC that processes everything. Here you have different electoral authorities run by the secretaries of state, and so there are different permutations in a very complex conversation about how the United States system works. Florida, for example, allowed ballots to be processed before November 3rd. So there was a lot of mail-in and absentee ballots in the state of Florida, but Florida election law allows those ballots to be processed as they came in, so then you don't have such a big backlog on election day. In the state of Pennsylvania, for example, and this speaks to why we are seeing these delays, the legislature in Pennsylvania, which is Republican controlled, and the Democratic governor of the state of Pennsylvania could not reach an agreement on how to deal with what was going to be a surge in mail-in ballots and absentee ballots, which was the first time the state allowed that kind of voting without any reason. So because of the pandemic, states changed their laws to allow a greater access to absentee and mail-in ballots. And so what the state legislature, the Republican legislature, and the Democratic governor were unable to do was to allow the processing of those ballots to start perhaps a week earlier, so that there wouldn't be such a backlog on November 3rd, which was the only time that people that were tabulating these ballots were allowed to open envelopes, start processing them, and start counting them. And so that really speaks to why you are seeing the delays in places like Pennsylvania, but also the fact like places like Nevada, where you can still receive ballots that are postmarked, which means you've posted it on November 3rd, which is Election Day, but you can then receive it a week later up to November 10th. So, I don't know if we're going to get a result from a place like Nevada where, the six electoral college votes could essentially put Biden closer to 270, if not over the top, if you are going to take the AP and Fox's projection that is already won Arizona. So he's at 253. AP and Fox says is at 264, plus 6 in Nevada puts him over 270. So Biden has so many routes to get to 270. The president, unfortunately, not the same.
Well, I was writing some notes from our conversation yesterday, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong. From what we spoke about yesterday, it does seem that the race for presidency is usually decided in a sort of small number of key battleground states that might switch party allegiance between elections. Let's talk about those states. You're talking about Nevada right now. We did speak quite a bit about Georgia and Pennsylvania yesterday. Which other key states are we really sort of watching at this time? I mean, I do hear you saying that Joe Biden has many routes to get to 270. But if we were to zone in, which key states are we really at this point kind of seeing as the first to bring him to that 270, if I can put it that way?
Yeah, so you're correct, right? So basically the Democrats win Democratic strongholds, the Republicans win Republican strongholds, and that gets you only so far up the ladder to 270, right? So the climb has to continue. How does the climb continue to 270? Swing states. What's outstanding in terms of those swing states? Georgia, Nevada, Arizona, Pennsylvania, North Carolina. We're not talking too much about North Carolina because the margins in North Carolina currently favor the president. It looks like the president will win that. I think he has a lead over 100,000 votes. That is unlikely to shift in Biden's favor. So if the president were to get North Carolina's 15 votes, that'll put him a little bit closer to 270. Where the problem lies is that the president needs to then win basically all the other swing states, the majority of the rest of them. So Georgia, he's currently trailing by 7,000 votes. Nevada, he's currently trailing by 22,500 votes. Biden has been able to expand his lead in Nevada over the last 24 hours. Arizona, the president has been slowly catching Biden. Biden had a lead of over 115,000. It has come down to 90, then 80. It is now only at 29,000. But what the Biden campaign is saying, and remember, AP and Fox have called this for Biden, they are saying it's going to narrow, but the president will not pass Biden, and that by this stage, for the first time since 1996, is going to go Democrat. We are seeing a tightening here. And what the Republicans are seeking to do in Arizona is to actually eke a lead ahead there so that they can say, can you see, you shouldn't have called this early, and that will give them some momentum in making the argument in places like Georgia and Pennsylvania that you cannot call these races too quickly because the president is still in it here. But if he loses Arizona early, that will be a death knell in many ways for this president's ambitions. Pennsylvania, 28,000 outstanding. So those are the only ones that are outstanding. The president has won some swing states. Biden has won some swing states. When you think about the blue wall in the Midwest, places like Wisconsin, places like it's escaping me now. Wisconsin, Michigan,
too many states.
That was too many states, but I got it back. Sometimes you hit a blank spot in his brain. But he's resurrected those swing states. But of course, the president doing very well in places like Florida and Ohio, which were also swing states. So now that you've got some swing states, I've got some swing states. These are the ones that are left: Georgia, Nevada, Arizona, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, as I say, favoring the president. So this is really the four that's going to determine who wins the presidency. And right now, Biden is leading in those four, and we don't see how the president comes back here. Not certainly in all of them. Maybe Arizona, Nevada seems a little bit out of reach. Georgia's going a certain way. Pennsylvania, any Democrat in Pennsylvania, and even some Republican leaders in Pennsylvania are saying we don't see any fraud, and we don't see how the president comes back now.
I found it quite interesting that, Trump's favorite channel, Fox, is also talking about the fact that, Trump might have to concede. But it does seem that Trump is not in any mood to do so. How long realistically, and I mean, it's difficult to say with all these legal cases he's talking about, lawyers, all of that, all these cases that he wants to put forward. How long can he really sort of drag it out realistically without conceding? Because, all of us are kind of sitting there and saying, what's happening?
I'm scratching my chin because, I really don't know how long he's going to drag it out, right? This is Donald Trump. There will be pressure quietly. There will be pressure quietly building from within the Republican Party to say, hey, you can't bring the America's democracy down with you here. And so slowly but surely you're going to start seeing that. You mentioned Fox News. You're absolutely right. Some of the Fox News presenters last night were saying, Mr. President, if you lose, you have to leave with grace. The same way you left with grace on using whatever example they used. But there is pressure building. You also saw Lindsey Graham, one of the senators from South Carolina that has just won re-election, initially talking about how that we have to defend the president, but I just saw a piece where he was quoted as saying that Joe Biden will even though the Republicans will control the Senate, right? Democrats will not control the Senate immediately. That Republicans who confirm a new president's cabinet members will give him leeway to appoint his cabinet, which is a very interesting statement to make as a close Trump ally, to say we will afford Joe Biden the opportunity to seat the cabinet members that he wants, because Senate has to confirm. So that you're seeing these nuances, these slight shifts that give you an indication that the firewall, if we use a South African term, the lager that has surrounded President Trump is beginning to break. We are beginning to see cracks in that wall, and that I think is an indication of the trajectory that Biden has sought to maintain here. That is certainly the case, but also that you get a sense of the confidence that's emanating from the Biden campaign. As much as last night was not a victory speech, it was a presidential speech. He didn't just talk about the election. He talked about how he was going to be a president for everybody. He didn't talk about who's winning and who's losing. He talked about the coronavirus pandemic that is surging out of control in this country. Over 130,000 new cases in the last 24 hours. You want to talk about numbers, that's a number right there. Over 10 million cases in the United States. We're seeing an explosion of cases here now. And, coming out and talking about the issues and the plans that he has really is, showing a lot of confidence here while we see this equivocation and the shooting in the dark, if you will, from the president flow.
All right. It's always a pleasure. Thank you very much, Sherwin Bryce-Pease. No doubt we'll be catching up with you soon. Thank you. That's Sherwin Bryce-Pease in New York for us, giving us the latest on the US elections 2020. We're going to take a short break. Do stay with us.